Good afternoon and welcome to the Council Committee of the Whole meeting of February 12th, 2025. I'll call this meeting to order and take this opportunity to read our land acknowledgement. The City respectfully acknowledges the Beaver, Cree, Dene, and Métis people as the original caretakers of these lands and surrounding areas. We are grateful to live, learn, work, and play on Treaty 8 territory within Turtle Island and acknowledge these lands have been home to diverse and sovereign First Nations and Inuit nations since time immemorial. Thank you for that opportunity. Moving on to item number 3 of our agenda today, under reports, item 3.1, an update in regards to our advocacy priorities. And I'll give Ms. Pinnock a moment to come up to the presentation table. Good afternoon, whenever you're ready. No rush.
Okay, good afternoon. Just a couple of quick updates on advocacy. As you know, the provincial legislature will be back in session later this month, and we are anticipating the release of the budget on February 27th. So we'll be watching that closely to see what funding is being allocated to a number of different projects, items that Council has been actively advocating for, including the Northwestern Polytechnic Trade Centre, the Masco Medical Centre, Highway 40X, and also looking at what additional funding is being allocated for new schools in the capital budget. One of the pieces of legislation that we'll be watching is amendments to legislation related to electricity distribution and transmission. A lot of work has been done by Council regarding advocacy and research on that front. And additionally, the AB Muni's Spring Caucus will happen in March, and if we're successful in securing a meeting with the Minister of Municipal Affairs at that event, there will be a further opportunity to discuss Council's priorities, including LGFF and the inclusion of the Aquaterra assets piece. On the federal front, as noted last month, Parliament is prorogued till the end of March 24th. So we are continuing to monitor announcements from the federal government regarding the Housing Accelerator Fund funding. And we have had positive indications from the federal government that the biometric scanning services to support newcomers would be available potentially in Grande Prairie in the next few months, but no firm timelines around that. And then upcoming for next month, we'll be looking at bringing forward the updated priorities for Council's consideration.
So thanks for your presentation. So just that last piece, I think is in particularly important in regards to the conversation next month will be about updating. Optimistically, we'll be able to remove some things because the province is going to make some announcements that are favorable to our list of advocacy items. And at that time is the time you'd prefer Council to bring potentially new ones, is what you're suggesting?
Yes, we're hoping to wait till after budget to see what is announced, and then working with Council to bring forward any additional items for consideration and any items the Council has.
Excellent. Okay, thanks for that. I'll go to the queue, recognizing Councillor Blackmore.
Thank you, Mayor Clayton. I'm wondering, Ms. Pinnock, if you did mention the Housing Accelerator grant funding. Has any of that money been announced at all since Christmas time, or is it a mystery?
Ms. Pinnock?
Thank you for the question through the chair. I do have a bit of an update in the grants update related to the Housing Accelerator Fund. So I could address that now or wait till... Okay, let's pop over here. So we have been monitoring that closely. We haven't had any information on our application, but we have seen in Ontario and Eastern Canada and a couple in BC, or one in BC, that have been announced. So Winnipeg, Peterborough, a number of smaller communities, Charlottetown, they all have announcements around the second phase of the Housing Accelerator Fund.
Okay, I'm not going to hold my breath, but thanks.
Okay. Thanks for that. Councillor Bressie.
Great, thank you. Maybe it's part of the conversation you were just talking about, but when are we going to talk about resolutions we want to bring forward to the AB Munis convention next year? for this year.
Councillor Bessie, I think that's probably, and I'll speak with Ms. Pinnock later, but I think that's probably the appropriate time in the next meeting when we discuss advocacy priorities. It aligns well that potential resolutions that could come out of those, unless you had something specific you wanted to address today.
No, that was my assumption. I just want to make sure that we're thinking about creating time for that at a future meeting. I don't want to talk about it today.
Okay, perfect. Councillor O'Connor.
I'm probably a little early on this topic, so I just wanted to raise it, is lobbying for prevention, not just recovery. And we saw what happened for one of the groups that came forward, and that's kind of alarming for us. So I'm just wondering.
Yeah, so earmark that. Let's bring that up next meeting and maybe put some pen to paper of if you have some specific thoughts on it. And yeah, I think great conversation for when we update our advocacy items.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Bosch.
Thank you, Mayor. You brought up the biometric center, potentially, or an office or scanner office here. Do you have any more details on that, or is it just an announcement coming shortly?
Ms. Pinnock?
Through the chair, we don't have anything specific yet. We have had positive indications from the federal government that is something that they are considering, and we're hopeful that in the next few months we'll have some additional information to share. It would be likely through Service Canada, where the services would be offered.
And nothing because of the pirogue will be an issue in regard. This is more administration side.
Through the chair, likely more on the administrative side, but like I said, we haven't had any firm dates or timelines or anything like that regarding that.
Okay, good to hear. Thank you.
Thanks for that. Councillor Plott.
Thanks, Mayor Clayton. I'm just wondering if we have an update on the recovery centre that was announced by the province, and I did a sod turning last year. I'm just wondering if there's an announcement of when they're actually going to start, or if it's actually been RFP'd and we've got somebody actually building it yet.
Ms. Pinnock?
Through the chair, I don't have any specifics at the moment.
So I can tell you what I know.
Okay.
Just reading a text. The functional design began this past February. The draft plan is complete. Construction is anticipated early 2025 with completed anticipated early 27.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I see no one else in the queue for advocacy, so thanks for that. Moving on to the next item under grant update. Ms. Pinnock, is that you as well? Perfect, thanks.
Thank you, Mayor Clayton. As you know, the department recently brought forward the 2024 annual incoming grant report, where we noted that we still have 21 outstanding applications from 2024, with 5 that are currently pending and in negotiations. Since the last update at CCW, a couple of grants have been submitted. A couple highlights include an application to the Government of Canada Employment and Social Development for the 2025 Canada Summer Jobs Grant, where we've requested approximately $414,000 for 32 seasonal youth positions across the organization. We've also applied for $250,000 from the Government of Alberta's Ministry of Trade, Immigration and Multiculturalism for a SLIP grant, Settlement, Immigration and Language Project, which would further support housing and community development in continuing the Grande Prairie Inclusive and Caring Community Initiative. Also through FCM, we've applied for the Local Leadership for Climate Adaptation Grant, seeking just over $100,000 to complete a climate adaptation plan, and just over $50,000 through the Firehouse Subs Public Safety Foundation for some bunker gear for the fire department members. We are expecting to hear on our local growth and sustainability grant. We were hoping to hear by the end of this month. It's a little bit delayed, so we're anticipating hearing by the end of next month. And as noted earlier, we are still monitoring and have not had any reach out from the federal government on our Phase 2 Housing Accelerator Fund grant, but we are seeing some of those announcements starting to roll out.
No one in the queue on that. So thanks for that update. Appreciate that. Moving on to item 3.3. There is... I see Mr. Nellis and Mr. Hinton. Chief Blavin, if you wanted to introduce this.
Thanks, Mayor Clayton. So during the 2025 budget deliberations, Council approved the 132nd Avenue and 116th Street intersection expansion study for $250,000. Subsequent to budget deliberations, administration reviewed additional opportunities to enhance the city's economic readiness, and one of the things that came up was expanding the scope of that work to include the twinning of 132nd Avenue and 116th Street. This wasn't identified as high of a priority as the intersection work that was approved at budget, but given that we were doing a project and we do have it's probably near the next highest priority that we have, and we believe that it aligns with Council's strategic plan, and it would be a reasonable use of the Strategic Initiatives Fund. One slight update, though, on that is that, and maybe I'll pass it over to the CFO just on the funding source. There was one thing that hadn't been reconciled previously.
Wait.
Thank you, Mayor Clayton. So as Chief Glavin had noted, when we had proposed $500,000 from Council's Strategic Initiatives Fund, the 160 committed to Helping Hands had not been included. So it's about 325 that's available for use.
Okay, thanks for that update. Turn it over to Mr. Nellis.
Good morning, or good afternoon, and through the chair. Yes, as Chief Glavin said, there was a approval of the preliminary design for 132nd Avenue and 116th Street, noting that our population is increasing. We're getting closer to the 90,000 threshold in our transportation master plan that would have triggered the upgrades that are mentioned in this report. So that's the twinning of 116th Street from the south city limit to the north city limit, as well as the twinning of 132nd Avenue from 103rd Street to 116th Street. By completing this preliminary work, we're able to identify the utility conflicts that might be in place, any environmental mitigations that might be present, as well as getting some preliminary costing for these construction items so that future councils will be able to plan and execute these projects. Right now, the intersection of 132nd Avenue and 116th Street is under considerable load and definitely isn't functioning as intended during peak hours. And as you can see, we're hitting levels of service E and F during peak periods. So these upgrades would be intended to mitigate those pressures as well as dealing with future growth in that northwest quadrant of the city. And with that, we would be happy to take any questions about the report or the project.
Thanks for that, Mr. Nellis. Recognizing Councillor Bosch.
Thank you, Mayor Clayton. My question is, if we originally started with 500,000 here in this motion, and now we're down to 325, does that have any impacts on your study?
Mr. Nellis.
And if so, what are they?
We won't know the impacts on the study until we put it out for RFP and get the quotes back. So depending when that comes back, if we don't have enough funding to complete, we may have to come back to council to either get the additional funding or make a decision whether or not to proceed with the project.
All right. Councillor Plott.
Thanks, Mayor Clayton. I'm just curious on, so if I understand this right, this would give admin the ability to come back and say what land we still need to acquire for right-of-ways, all that stuff would happen in all these corridors. If we didn't need to go as extreme on those corridors, if we didn't say we wanted to expand, would that have to be told now, or would we have to alter the RFP if we weren't worried about, say, 84th to 68th Ave? We're not worried about twinning that at this point. Would admin need to know that now, or what? I'm just curious on how the appetite of what that would look like, I guess, and how much that would change the RFP.
Mr. Nellis.
Through the chair, if we were to remove those sections, it would definitely reduce the scope of the RFP and would reduce the eventual cost of the design. So yeah, that would be the primary impact on the budgeting of this project.
And just, I guess, a question for admin, and just for me, last term, I feel like we had a conversation about 92nd Street and 72nd Ave for a couple of years before it actually got to fruition. And as much as I'm excited about us getting this done and supportive of it, there's one area that would be dealt with on 77th Ave and 116th Street. But I feel like there's two other areas of town that I get comments on when I drive up to that I see concerns, and they're 92nd Street and 132nd Ave. Coming out of Crystal Lake, going towards the County Industrial Park can be quite bad at times. We've had proponents come in for the one more east of that. And also Bryan Lake Drive and 68th Ave seems to be very congested. Kind of reminds me of the 72nd to 92nd. Those aren't on the reports today, those two other intersections. So Would you have an idea of if somebody wanted to look, if I wanted to, the appetite to add those two as well? Would you have a sense of what that would cost to do those two intersections specifically, to look at what it would take for land acquisition, environmentals, and getting design ready to move forward on those?
Mr. Nellis?
It'd be difficult. We're not prepared at this point to be able to give you those cost estimates on that design work. It's something we could certainly bring back to council at a later date. There has been some preliminary work done at 68th Avenue and O'Brien. So there is a project that we could execute there and is in the queue. As far as 92nd Street goes, in the Transportation Master Plan, that's not until a further population horizon. So right now that's sitting at the 120,000 population level, where the upgrades that we're identifying now would be around the 90,000 level. So these ones kind of took precedence in the queue as far as our initial planning had gone.
So just maybe a question for admin or maybe our CEO. Is there what would be the best way to, not to stall the conversation today, but if we wanted to chat about those other areas, would it be better to just bring that to a standing committee at a future date to ask for a report back on those? Or
Chief Glavin?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Clayton. Yeah, I think it would be appropriate for direction for us to come back and report on what those costs would look like to our Operational Services Committee.
Okay, appreciate that. Thank you.
Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you very much, Mayor Clayton. Thank you very much, Mr. Hinton, Mr. Nellis. Question for you, gentlemen. So on the intersection on 132nd, 116th, it was rated as a E to F for its ability for level of service. That during peak times, it's pretty congested. Now, have we done any other road studies along 116th and 132nd? I imagine 132nd when we were looking at the lights by JP2 there. But what are their levels of service as far as congestion goes during peak times?
Mr. Nellis?
We can get you that information. I haven't got the levels of service for those particular intersections at this time.
Okay, no, that's fair. I just had it on my list of things to ask that I didn't have an answer to. The other question that I asked is when we do the intersection upgrades, are we going to be doing them to a twin standard, so we won't have to do any road realignments in the future if we were to proceed with the twinning of 116 and 132nd?
Mr. Nellis?
Thank you, through the chair. I'm not quite sure I understand your question.
Yeah, that's fair. So when we build the intersection, right now we have a couple of roads on it. If we have twin standards going north out of the city and coming into the city from the south, and then east-west on 132nd, if we're going to twin those roads, are we going to have the intersection laid out to anticipate that twinning, like with utilities and stuff like that? Like this last summer, I think we moved the intersection lights and the utilities along the Staples corner there a couple times over, waiting for the layers of the different utilities companies to come in. But as part of the upgrades to this intersection, are we going to be ready if a council in the future or this council says, yeah, twin it, we're cool with that?
Thank you, through the chair. So as part of the staging of this eventual project, should we do the intersection as, say, phase one? Absolutely, we would build that to the future footprint. So if we were to do the intersection first, we would place the traffic light standards in such a way that if we were to twin after that or subsequent to that, that we wouldn't have any throwaway costs, or would have very minimal throwaway costs.
Awesome. That's exactly what I was looking for. Thanks, Mr. Nellis.
I'm just going to ask a quick question before I go to the others in the queue. When in your reference on the 2019 traffic counts and obviously the master plan of 2020, when you talk about approaching capacity based on a population, what considerations given to other variables? If all of a sudden the traffic flow decides to change how they prefer to move within our community and we don't reach those population numbers, what evaluation is given to that? Just simply people prefer to drive a different way, which creates intense usage and different evaluation if you didn't reach those populations. So what amount of the decision for electeds in a master plan is based on population, and what amount can be based on just the actual movement of traffic?
Thank you, through the chair. So there are a number of factors that go into the transportation master plan. Of course, we look at that transportation or that population threshold, but that's in conjunction with looking at origin destination studies, looking at traffic flows, looking at the plans for the surrounding community, Alberta Transportation's plans for highways and those kinds of things around the city. So it isn't based necessarily on that population number, but it's identified that as we approach that population number, those factors would come together to justify that upgrade.
Yeah, I appreciate that. For me, I mean, this evaluation is more about the reality of traffic movement in our community than the, without calling it arbitrary, the arbitrary population number. So I was just curious. Councillor O'Toole.
Well, thank you very much. Back to 116th and 132. I know we had a bunch of shredded rubber at one time to fill in the swamp area on the other side. Did we ever put that to use?
Chief Glavin?
Thanks, Mayor Clayton. Yes, we did, but not in the manner that it was initially intended for. There was a program at one point where Alberta Recycling was promoting that as a use, and it didn't ultimately get approved by Alberta Environment, if I remember correctly, to use it in that manner. So it ended up being used as part of the material for the baseball diamonds that we recently constructed.
Oh, there you go. So just to follow up, that's a swampy area. That's going to be a huge investment to try and fill that up. And are we going to raise the other road going across?
Mr. Nellis.
The private road, or the across the 116th, straight west?
Thank you, through the chair. Right now, the intended scope is to basically stay, not to do much work on that west side of that road. However, they'll take those factors into consideration when we proceed with this preliminary design.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Bressie.
Great, thank you. So I'm kind of curious, this is work we have to do to be able to do construction that's needed in result of growth. So why can't our transportation system levy reserve be used for this work?
Mr. Nellis, I don't think anyone said it couldn't. This was just a suggested funding source. Is that correct?
So then I guess could we?
Yeah, that's a question for the CFO then. Could the transportation levy be used to fund this?
If you could give me a few minutes, Mayor Clayton, absolutely, I'll answer that for you.
Okay. Anything else, Councillor Bressie?
Nope, that's my only question.
Okay. Councillor Berg.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Clayton. Thanks, gentlemen. Just curious, if we approve this and we get the study done this year, when do you anticipate it would come back to budget for actual construction? Is it something slated for next year or down the road?
Mr. Nellis.
Thank you, through the chair. Should this be approved, we would expect that this design work would be completed within 1 to 2 years. And once that is completed, then we could start bringing phases possibly forward to council. If this went in short order, the earliest we could see shovels in the ground would likely be 3 to 4 years from now.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor O'Connor and Ms. Whiteway, whenever you're ready, just jump in the queue so I know. Councillor O'Connor.
Yes, this may be a little bit premature. I'm just wondering if a traffic circle at 116th and 132nd could keep the flow up and save costs on lights. Not sure if that's a possibility of whether or not we could do that. And if there's not enough money, could we do it sooner than waiting 4 years to relieve that traffic flow?
Mr. Nellis.
Thank you, through the chair. Through the preliminary design process, they'll look at all possible traffic control configurations. In that particular location with the wetlands that have been identified, the additional area that might be required for a traffic circle might make that difficult. However, that's something to be considered during that design consideration.
Thank you.
Councillor Plott.
Thanks, Mayor Clayton. You just tweaked something on the wetland for me. I'm just wondering, have we done any wetland remediation works or started on any of that on 132nd and 116th now? Have we done anything with AE on trying to get approvals for that intersection? Or
Mr. Nellis?
Thank you, through the chair. There hasn't been any work done in that area so far. So basically, this preliminary design would help us to identify the permissions and remediations that might be necessary to proceed, but there's been nothing done at this point.
Okay, so, and I just want to clarify if I think I heard what I correct was, so this design, if we approved it and it got done, we'd have some kind of design back by the end of the year on the 116th, 132nd at a higher level? that we would be able to go to RFP potentially the year after to start? I'm just, you mentioned something about 3 or 4 years away would be the earliest we could start a project. Because I'm trying to understand why it would take so long to get to a shovel in the ground if we wanted to go.
Unfortunately, with all the environmental issues in that area as well, plus land requirements, it'll probably take 3 to 4 years before we get all those approvals and be able to get the land purchased or dealt with before we can do the construction.
Okay, so is there anything else today or soon that we can fast track to expedite that? Because 3 or 4 years away is a long time away. I guess if that is the case, I don't know how we message that to community properly, because they're going to just feel like that's an awfully long time away when you can start a brownfield development and have houses in the ground in 18 months somewhere brand new versus this. So I'm just curious, how we message that, I guess, for that, or if you can maybe at a later report show us a chronological why it would take that long to get to that level, because I guess I'm not computing that we'd be 3 or 4 years away before we could put a shovel in the ground.
Through the chair, we'd be happy to report back on that chronology for you at a later date if you'd like.
I don't know if that's something we did a motion on or if that would just be a subsequent report that would come for this, but I know for myself, I would sure like to see the timelines, just to know if there's anything that council can do to fast track that, or how we message that to the community.
I would suspect, but Chief Glavin, please clarify that if council were to approve this work, that there would be a timeline included as next steps for future councils?
Thanks, Mayor Clayton. Yeah, certainly we can get a timeline together. But outside of this, once this study's done, there's also going to need to be the land assembly. So any land that we need to purchase, that can take time, especially if we don't have a willing seller on the other end. And then on the detailed design would still happen for actual construction after this. And I also have a answer for the levies as well. This work does not qualify for levies. It's not in the bylaw as an eligible expense. So construction would be, but this level of design would not.
So you're out of the queue now? He took your thunder? All right, that's okay. Councillor Blackmore.
It seems that the fastest way to move this forward is with a motion today, and so I would make that motion.
So the motion as presented in the document?
Yes, I would ask that committee recommend council approve $325,000 in funding from Council Strategic Initiatives Fund to expand the scope of the 2025 budget item for plans and studies to include the preliminary design for the upgrade of 132nd Avenue from 103rd Street to 116th Street and the upgrade of 116th Street from North City Limit to South City Limit. And then speaking to that, if someone has a better idea for funding, I'm completely open to a friendly amendment on that subject portion of the motion. But I think we all understand that when we're dealing with wetlands and in Alberta environment and many other restrictions in an area such as that, it takes a lot of time. And the best way to move forward with that is to take that first step today.
So the motion is in order. I just had a comment because I see no one else in the queue, or a question rather for administration. In regards to the 3 items identified that this funding would potentially be for preliminary design on the 3 projects, is there a priority of those 3? My fear is, now that industry has heard that we were going to spend $500 and now we're going to spend $325, that they're going to come back with a reduced scope of work. And so I'm curious on your thoughts of priorities. Is the one project based on the 3? Is there a first, second, and third, in your opinion?
Through the chair, in my opinion, and agreeing with Councillor Palat, we're definitely dealing with congestion issues at that intersection currently, so that would probably be our top priority.
Thank you for that. I think that that is a good motion to clarify. I verified with the CFO, 325 is the amount that's appropriate. I understand there is no alternative funding sources. So unless anybody has discussion or debate on the motion, I will call the question.
Councillor Palat.
Rusty in favor.
Thiessen in favor.
O'Connor in favor.
And that carries unanimously. Thanks so much, gentlemen. I'll give us a moment. We're going to move to number 4, but first I'll recognize Councillor Palat.
Thanks, Mayor Klein. Just on the same conversation here, I guess. Well, I'm just wondering, I don't think the road's changing where it's going to go. So I'm just wondering, is there anything we need to do to have land acquisitions being started right away and for us to be triggering land acquisition? I appreciate environmentals can take time, but if we're pretty confident we're going to be twinning these roads at some point, I'm just wondering why we wouldn't go ahead with trying to do the land acquisitions for all those necessary areas now.
Chief Glavin?
Thanks, Mayor Clayton. The main thing would be what the work we're proposing would provide us with the individual ownership plans, would tell us exactly how much land we need from each adjacent landowner. Up until we get that, we wouldn't necessarily know how much to buy.
Okay.
Councillor Toole?
Yeah, it kind of surprises me that next council that gets elected may not even have any, it may not even be completed by that time. So we're talking a second council that will deal with any construction just because of the land acquisitions and environment. So that's 4 years. It's kind of hard to tell somebody that it's an environmental thing that's we got to deal with. So it is what it is. It's just that I kind of, when you hear it, it's kind of scary. Thank you.
Councillor Plott?
Sorry, Mayor Clay, maybe I'm just confused on this. We have design standards specifically for cross sections. Wouldn't we be able to have like a 99% best guess of what land acquisitions would look like and what environmental requirements would need to be? Like I guess I'm struggling why we need all the engineering done before we need to go to land to try to look at land acquisition.
So Chief Glavin, sorry, I'm going to help you out here. Chief Glavin, would it be fair to speak to the appropriate landowners that there's a land acquisition up to a certain amount so that those conversations are started?
Thanks,
There's a handful of landowners there. It's not a big task.
Yeah, that's something we could potentially that we could take a look at doing here in the interim.
Mr. Nellis.
And sorry, through the chair, by doing the IOPs, we're able to identify the exact land that we need, so it would avoid us over purchasing or purchasing, parcels we might not need. So it could definitely reduce the overall cost of the project if we execute this first.
Yeah. So Chief Glavin, I think you heard Council's intent is to, as mentioned by Councillor Plott, we know that eventually this road's going to be widened. There will be some land acquisitions. Any preliminary work that can be done, I think, would be in favor of council. If it requires additional approval or funding, please feel free to bring it back to council for conversation. Okay, perfect. Thank you. If I could get a motion from one of my colleagues to go in camera. Motion, Councillor Thiessen, go for it.
I'll move that we go in camera on behalf of Councillor O'Connor.
Thanks so much. That motion is in order. Please, I'll call the question.
Plott in favor.
Vote. Councillor Plott votes in favor.
Thiessen in favor.
O'Connor in favor.
That carries unanimously, and if we'll just give our